So I was thinking, अगर आप लोग अपना introduction एक दो sentences में दे, that might be the best, if that's okay with you all. And after that, then like I can ask one question to each of you. Whoever I ask the question to, that person can predominantly answer. But if other people want to add something later to, अगर आप लोग अपना introduction एक दो sentences में दे, mindful of time, if that's okay. Bilal, can you mute yourself? Sorry, I can hear myself. And after that, then. So, yeah, and then one question for each of you, and then we can open it up to the audience if they have any questions, discussions. And I think just one point from me is, I think the main aim of the event is to just share, our stories, talk about many things that might be common between India and Pakistan in our, sort of border region. So we have this knowledge exchange being facilitated. So that's the main aim. So we can try and direct the conversation towards that. So yeah, I don't know if there are any questions or thoughts from you guys or something to consider.
Munit, can I just ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So how much time do we get to answer the questions? Will you be moderating?
Yeah. So I was thinking we can keep it, I mean, if you have 4 questions, so one for each. So not more than sort of 7 to 8 minutes for that question. So that gives us about 40 minutes with the introduction to do that section. So hopefully that should be enough. If we feel later, people are not asking too many questions and whatnot, then we can feel free to add to that question or just share something completely different. But yeah, I was thinking 40 minutes उसके लिए and then 20 minutes, just to sort of open the floor up so audience gets some time to interact.
नहीं भाई, ये मैं लिंक शेयर कर दूं किसी और ग्रुप के अंदर भी अब?
हाँ प्लीज कर लीजिए.
मैं कर रहा हूँ बस.
Any other Marine, Hussain sir, Noshin ma'am, or all good?
Sounds good, Munit. Sorry, one more thing. So, what kind of participants are we expecting? Are they students or practitioners?
So I think, sorry.
I think it's going to be a mixed one, like both students and the academics and the people that are currently working in the field.
Yeah, I think mostly students or sort of more young researchers. Yeah. But there's going to be a mix. Great. And if possible, I know Saruni, you're traveling, but if possible, it'd be nice to have our videos on, if possible, just in terms of connectivity and things like that. So it's more interactive, but if not,
I'll be reaching a cafe in just 5 minutes, so please bear with me.
And Bilal, you will share this slide.
मैंने कर दिया.
अच्छा, आपने already कर दिया. Nice. तो वो लिंक भी आप शेयर कर लो, है ना? With people who are.
YouTube का लिंक मैंने अभी नहीं किया, वो भी कर दूं.
वो I think after we let everyone in and
वो मैंने दूसरों को कर दिया, जो मतलब हमारे पहले से जिन्होंने वेबिनार्स में पार्टिसिपेट किया था, उनको मैंने YouTube का कर दिया, दूसरों को मैंने सारा Zoom का कर दिया. 18 हो गए, हम लोग एडमिट कर लें 18 को.
कर लीजिए.
चलो.
Hi everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for joining us today. We'll just wait for people to join in and then we can start in maybe a few minutes.
मैं just participants को unmute करना.
Yes, sorry Bilal, you were saying.
Actually वो people unmute कर लेते हैं, तो मैंने सबको जो है वो mute कर दिया था इसीलिए.
Yes.
अब तो मतलब हम लोग करेंगे वही आएगा.
Great. We'll just wait for a few minutes, for people to join in. We can start. In the meantime, if people want to just type in, where they're joining us from, your name, what you do, so we get a sense of who is here, that'll be nice. I can start by typing in. So while we just wait for people to join in, maybe I'll just give a quick sort of introduction as to how this event will go forward. We have 4 panelists who I'll shortly introduce in a second, and then we'll have some discussion with the panelists, and then if people have questions, thoughts, people are feel free to type them in the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself, I think you can sort of raise your hand, and Bilal, if you can help me with that, unmuting people, and then they can ask questions or their thoughts. So we want this to be really interactive. So maybe just looking at time, I can. Oh, it's not clear. Is this better?
Yes, it's better.
Sorry. So maybe just looking at time, we can start, and then you can let people in as they trickle in. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you for everyone who's putting your name and location in the chat. It's really, really nice to have you. So firstly, Happy New Year to everyone. I hope 2022 is very fruitful and full of adventure, and most importantly, good health for you and your loved ones. This is the first webinar that we as Conservation Optimists in India and Pakistan are doing together. So maybe I'll just start very briefly about and give an introduction about what conservation optimism is for those who don't know, and what this event really is. So very briefly, conservation optimism is a movement that wants to take sort of the doom and gloom narrative away in the conservation sector globally. It started in the UK, but we've sort of grown and more regionally with these things called regional hubs. And we in India were the first CO regional hub, and Pakistan was the second CO regional hub. So the whole idea about conservation optimism is to share stories that inspire people, to take action for nature, positive action for nature, and even if things are not going okay, to learn from supposed failures or things that didn't go well. So it's more a sort of a proactive approach that we want to take. And this event, it's called Bridging Borders, as you must have read, in the description, is basically our first attempt to sort of collaborate with our in the sense, the India team with our neighbors in Pakistan and vice versa. Just sort of provide a platform where we can have knowledge exchange happening, between practitioners and researchers from the 2 countries. So that's the spirit of this event, really. And we'll have 4 wonderful panelists with us today who will share their stories, their experiences. And as I said, throughout the event, it'll be lovely if people in the audience also, ask questions or share their stories in events, because this is hopefully a co-learning platform. So with that, I'll just hand over to our panelists. I'll just introduce them by name, and then I'll request them to sort of give a couple of sentences about who they are, where they're from, and what they do. So we have Dr. Saloni Bhatia, and then we have Dr. Mehreen Khalil, Dr. Nausheen Irshad, and Dr. Hussain Ali. So thank you so much, 4 of you, for being with us, especially. Maybe I'll ask Saloni to quickly give a couple of sentences about herself. Saloni.
Hi, thanks, Munib, for the introduction. It's really lovely to see people from so many different places joining in. I hope I'm audible. Sorry, I'm in a cafe, so pardon me, there's a lot of background noise. My name is Saloni. I am a conservation anthropologist, And most of my research experience and conservation experience has been in the high altitude regions of India, mainly Spiti and Ladakh, largely Ladakh. And for my research, I've kind of looked at how people coexist with carnivores like the snow leopard and wolf. And after that, for my postdoc, I looked at conservation technology and its role in influencing, wildlife related impact. So that's kind of been my broad area of interest to understand, how people relate to nature. What are the different kinds of relationships? What are the different shades of emotions as well as values that people associate with animals or even inanimate beings. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Currently, I'm a program associate at Wildlife Conservation Society in India. Thank you. Munit, you're on mute if you're saying something.
Yes, sorry. I think Bilal, you can only unmute me if I'm not mistaken. Thanks, Saloni, for your introduction. Noshi, ma'am, if I can ask you to quickly introduce yourself next, please. I don't know if you have to unmute her, Bilal, if I'm mistaken.
I think she got some low connection. I should ask her to unmute.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Excuse me?
We can hear you now, Dr. Nushin.
Okay, thanks. I have some problem in internet here.
Maybe we can come back to you, Roshi, ma'am. Yeah. Maybe, maybe you can give us a couple of sentences of introduction about yourself, please.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Munib, for inviting me on this platform. I've heard about conservation optimism actually from you last year, but unfortunately, I couldn't be a part of the blogs that you once told me to write about. Yeah, now I am here. So my name is Mehreen Khalil, and I am from Kashmir. I have done my PhD from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And I worked on the ecology and distribution of Himalayan grey langur in Kashmir region. Why in Kashmir region? Because this was the part of India where very little about the distribution and the ecology of langurs was known. So since I was from here, I took up this challenge and started working here. And currently I run an organization which is based in Kashmir by the name Wildlife Research and Conservation Foundation. There are 4 of us which have worked together, who have come together on this platform, and we majorly do awareness programs related to wildlife conservation, specifically in Kashmir. Yeah, that's about me.
Thank you, Mehreen, for being with us today. Hussain sir, if you can hear me, it'd be great if you can introduce yourself quickly.
Hello,
Yes.
Munib, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, Dr. Hussain.
Okay, thank you. First of all, hi everybody. I would like to thank Munib and Bilal for inviting me to this forum, because when they once first invited me, I never heard of this forum, but these guys were doing a great work, and I am sorry why I was not aware of this forum. So my name is Hussain Ali, and I am a wildlife ecologist working with the Snow Leopard Foundation, Pakistan since 2009, and about to graduate PhD student at University. For my research, I mainly focused on the distribution of wild ungulates in Gilgit-Baltistan and how the climate change is impacting them. So this was a brief introduction of my.
Thank you so much, sir. And Nosheen ma'am, if your internet is a bit better, maybe you can give us a couple of sentences of introduction.
Hello.
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I have some problem here of the internet. So I want to introduce myself. Can I do so?
Yes, please.
Yeah. If you can also turn on your camera, it would be nice.
I have weak internet. That's why I couldn't on my camera, and it's very difficult for me to convey even my introduction and to listen you because of weak internet here. Do you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes, we.
Okay. I am Nosheen. I did PhD in wildlife management in 2015, and currently I am working as assistant professor in University of Punch Rawalakot. And as far as my research is concerned, I'm doing work in human-wildlife conflicts in AJK, and I did work on common leopard, its hunting killing here. I have maintained its hunting record, and I did work on other species like porcupine, pig, who cause damage to the crops. And I am also doing work on squirrel, small Kashmir flying squirrel, who is causing massive loss to the orchard owners, as it is a frugivore species, and it is also a vulnerable species in Pakistan, and it is being killed by local people in revenge, you can say. So I'm doing work on its conservation, and I'm supervising many MPhil students, and I have supervised almost 15 students, and now I'm still doing work on different aspects of human-wildlife conflict in my hometown, and I have also doing work on human-wildlife conflicts in border area of AJK and Pakistan, as we are living here, though my Rawalakot is far away from the border, but one of my student who live in that remote area, she's doing work on the species, on the many important wild mammals who are being killed there because of firing, shelling, land mining, and forest fire due to firing and shelling. So I am also doing work on this. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Nosheen ma'am, for your introduction. And it's amazing to have such a diverse group of panelists. So I'm very excited to start our discussion. So maybe I'll just dive in and ask a question. But as I said, if there are thoughts people have, please feel free to put them in the chat. So Nosheen ma'am, if your internet is stable, I'd love to start with you. And it's really nice to have you because obviously, you're, as you said, an assistant professor in a university that's obviously from an academic sort of background or currently in an academic setting. Can you share with the participants some of the challenges of being an academic and having students or yourself working in some of these, as you alluded to, these sort of volatile areas or very sort of tough areas? What is it like being an academic? What is it like being a supervisor? So yeah, I just wanted you to shed some light on that a little more, either through stories or just your thoughts, please.
Oh, okay. Thanks. First of all, I will tell you that many important wild animals are being brutally killed here. This is really something that make me very, I'm very upset by this situation that animals are being killed, and many times the animals are killed for nothing. I mean, people kill them for fun, for leisure, and human-wildlife conflict is common worldwide. It's a global trend that wildlife is decreasing, but it is mainly dwindling. I will must say that it is decreasing in these rural areas where people, particularly the local communities, are more dependent upon the natural resources and the wild animals for food. and particularly, and they are also involved in its trade. So the situation is really very alarming. And regarding challenges here, the main thing is that people hide the reasons that why they are killing the animals, and it's really very difficult to record the different hunting record or reasons and the methods of killing. And during my studies, I did work last year, and I have maintained the hunting record from a border area of I will that was Muzaffarabad, between Muzaffarabad and India. And during a period of 1 year, almost 37 different species, including very important birds like monal, koklas, chief pheasant, and the common leopard and the barking deer, musk deer. These important species were found killed, and almost more than 400 individuals were found killed there. And as I mentioned, that recently we are doing work in another border area, that is India and Pakistan, that is Punch border. And again, the situation is very alarming there, that many different animals are found killed, including one of the last month we found a leopard that was injured by when it was crossing the landmine. The landmine was burst and the leopard was injured, and later on it was killed by the local community. And if I will talk about the challenges, the main thing is that people are not much aware of the importance of wild animals, and that how they are playing an important role in the ecosystem, and we must protect them, and we must not kill the animal for nothing. Yes, if it is so in revenge that say some animals who are attacking wild animals. I'm talking about the wild animals who are attacking upon the poultry or the domestic animals, or they are damaging the crops, as the pig porcupine is damaging the crops, the squirrel is damaging the fruits. So we have other evidences of different animals like the common leopard attack on the humans, and there are many deaths because of this human leopard conflict here in our area. So I will let me conclude that the thing is that yes, the animals, wild animals, are posing the harm on the humans and their assets, but there must be some other solution rather than their killing to control this conflict. Thanks.
Thank you, Snoshi. And that sounds like a very tough situation. And I mean, it's interesting because some of the things that you alluded to. I mean, I was born in the Kashmir part of India, very close to where Marine is from as well. And some of the things that you spoke about are so similar, very close to home. Things like conflict with leopards, bears, humans being affected by sort of the human-human conflict, where you have these barbed wires, landmines, things like that, impacting both human populations but also animal populations. So it's a complex situation. But I really love your point about how we need to find solutions that are beyond just sort of one of the two parties has to sort of lose their life or something like that. So thank you so much for telling us about what you do.
Thanks.
Maybe from there I'll jump to Mehreen. Mehreen, as you said, you're from the Kashmir part of India. Like, I just wanted to hear from you a little bit more about how it was to be a PhD student doing her work in this part of the country. I mean, I'm sure it must have been super challenging. I mean, the wonderful work you're doing with your NGO now, I'm sure that's also challenging. But I would love to particularly ask you how it was to be a woman while you were doing or while you're still doing work in this region, just to sort of share with our participants, please.
First of all, working in Kashmir was a challenge in itself. Leave aside that I was a woman working in wildlife in Kashmir. So working in Kashmir was challenging on the basis that I had to really convince, I'm sure every female in the group here had to really convince their family in the first level. And once they had convinced their family, they had to really convince their supervisors that they are really going to do it, that they are going to take this responsibility on their shoulders. And you have to be very once you are working in the Himalayas or in a terrain as this, you have to be both physically as well as mentally very strong to be, working in this kind of a field. So it was challenging on all aspects. It was, I had no exposure of working in the wildlife or working in areas like Himalayas. So it was my first experience and it was challenging on all the levels. Kashmir was no doubt, easy for me. Family was difficult. I had to, convince my family, um first thing, that I'm going to the field, that I'll be going to the field, I'll be staying alone, and there will be very few people with me. Um, they had their, what can I say? They had their reservations, coming from a very conservative family or very conservative society in general. Kashmiri families have very reservations towards females here. Second thing, that uh, I was very fortunate. Let's be very grateful that I was very fortunate that in the workplace I had no issues. People were very supportive. The wildlife department people in wildlife department in Kashmir were very supportive of me. Actually, they were more supportive than my family, I would say. So I did not face any challenges over there. Second thing, that it was a new thing for people here to see a female coming from a Muslim conservative background, um, working on such a topic that nobody would appreciate. Why would you want to work on langurs? Of all the things, why langurs has such? So uh, so these were the challenges that I faced. Personally, I faced various challenges. I had to keep myself motivated. I had to wake up in the morning telling that, okay, I have to go because I have to prove myself. So it was challenging on that level. Yeah, and as you said, and as our previous panelist also said, that working in borders has been very difficult, because you are very passionate. One, as a researcher, we are very passionate to work in these areas, but there are various political issues or other issues you can't subdue. So I know of people who are working in areas close to the borders. They are having difficulties in getting permits. Even if you're getting permits from the wildlife department, you don't get permits from army. So you are being checked each and every time. There are a lot of difficulties, there are a lot of challenges in that. As I said, you are very passionate to do something, but then there are various other things that keep you that pin you to the ground. So I have also faced some challenges in the field, in the sense that I had always felt that I am being checked at many places. My phone, either my phone is being tapped or something like that. But you are there to work and you have to work. That's what you want to do. So right now, as a manager of one of the organizations that I have started, I feel the challenge is to bring in more people to this kind of a field, this kind of science. It's very difficult for, as far as I am concerned, it's very difficult to bring in volunteers as such in Kashmir to have an idea of what wildlife conservation is. It's very difficult in that aspect. So I have found challenges right from the beginning, and I'm sure all of us have faced something similar. Yeah. Munib.
No, thanks, Mary, for all that information. I mean, it's so interesting, at the same time so difficult to hear some of these things, because it just sort of shows how you look at a researcher generally through their work, and then you look at their data, but behind all of that there is so much more.
Yeah.
That is real. I mean, one of the points you made reminded me, when I was doing my first fieldwork in Kashmir as well. Obviously the first thing we get is, or we try to get, is the wildlife permits. So you go with the wildlife permits, and then the army asks you what are you doing here, and then you say, okay, I have these wildlife permits, and then they say, oh, it doesn't really matter, you need permissions from us. Then you try to get permissions from them, and then they say, oh, actually the army might be under the police in this region, so you need to get permissions from the police. So it's just like, I guess it's really interesting and important to hear, from people like you, how there's a lot more behind that goes behind the scenes when a researcher goes out there. So thank you for what you do, and I wish you best of luck with all your endeavors, especially with your NGO. So moving from Mehreen, I was wondering if I could just jump to you, Saloni, and sort of, as you said, a lot of your work has been in the of India, looking at sort of human nature relationships. And, we call ourselves conservation optimism. And a lot of times, historically especially, conservation has really been about the wildlife. But your work has really sort of tried to take the lens, not away from it, but sort of zoom in to the human aspect. Can you give us a little bit more, or tell us a little bit more from your experiences or from your research about how it's important to look at human traits, especially in these bordering regions, when we consider wildlife conservation? Over to you.
Well, here's the thing. Just to give a background to perhaps people who don't know. So a lot of my work looked at stories, mainly folk stories, anecdotes, things like that about wild animals. And I just want to, before I get into that, just commend Mehreen on the kind of strength that she's shown, and I can completely relate to that. But one of the things, and I'm sure maybe Mehreen will agree, that as a woman, you also have one advantage. In my case, it was the fact that I could reach out to the women in the community, because they seemed more comfortable talking to me, than perhaps a male colleague. So in that sense, especially when it was a topic about stories and folklore, a lot of women seem to know a lot about, different things, right from stories about hunting, how they did it traditionally, to more recently, how they are being impacted, and all the invisible and intangible impacts of, living with animals. For example, the fear, the anxiety of attacks and things like that. That's just, I just wanted to add it as a kind of a tangent. Now, coming back to the question you asked, Puneet, so basically, the way I look at it, and a lot of people who work in the interdisciplinary space look at it is, conservation is also culture. It's a part of culture. It's a cultural trait in that sense, and therefore one can't separate culture from conservation. But what one can do is, through understanding societies, through understanding relationships between the different elements of a society, both human, non-human, animate and animal, we'll come at probably arrive at a perhaps a better rounded understanding of what it means to live with nature. And so for me, the folklore bit, actually the origin of that lies in my childhood, because as a kid, my father narrated a lot of stories to me. So did my grandmother, especially at bedtime. And they were about all these exotic adventures that different characters in the stories experience. And I always felt like I could connect the stories better. Even when you're reading a book, what we're looking at is the story, how well it flows, the narrative, how it makes us feel. And what happens eventually is, once you absorb these things, they become a part of you. And, they start then influencing your attitudes, your value systems, and perhaps how you will act in a particular situation. And similarly, folklore, when one studies it, especially when you look at folklore around wildlife, what we realized was a lot of the implicit biases that people had towards certain animals, say towards the wolf, had their origin in the stories that they were told about the wolf as while growing up. So the wolf, typically in the region of Ladakh, where I collected stories from, both in Kargil and Leh, the wolf was typically associated with a lot of negative connotations: greed, gluttony, wolves are idiots, that sort of a thing. And therefore, somewhere the resentment towards wolves, not to say that that's the only reason, because of course experience plays a role, but I think one gets a better sense of where the biases are coming from. And this is only as far as the negative is concerned, but then the folklores are also extremely rich and nuanced. So it's never completely black or white. And so the same animal in a different situation is leading a different life. So in some parts of Ladakh, for example, the wolves are considered good omens at the start of a journey. So I think what stories, and looking at different aspects of culture allow you to do is to kind of delve into, how people are actually making sense of their lived experience. Because it's not just the experience, it's also the interaction between people, what they, the traditional wisdom that is passed down to them. So there are many aspects that are influencing how people relate to their environment. And I think the effort to our work has mainly been to kind of try to focus on that and, kind of make these connections more explicit in that sense. So, yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Saroni. It's so intriguing to hear from you how stories can tell us, or folklore stories, whatever we want to call them, can tell us so much about how people relate to nature. And I think there was a quote I read some time ago that said something along the lines of how stories really shape the way we think and sort of convey obviously what our lived realities have been. So it's super intriguing. So thank you for sharing that. And I find it very interesting that how you said, similar species can have very different connotation across geographies or cultures. And I think there's so much for us as the conservation community to learn, going beyond just sort of the species biology or the species ecology, and really understand truly these interdisciplinary sort of spaces of how people interact with wildlife. So thank you so much for sharing that. Jumping now to Hussain sir, if you can hear me. Saloni sort of spoke about her experience predominantly in Ladakh. It's a wonderful mountain region of India. So jumping across the border to the mountain regions of Pakistan, where you do most of your work. I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about what are some of the challenges, particularly working in these high mountain regions where you work with the mountain ungulates and snow leopards, particularly in the border regions. But at the same time, sort of turning that question on its head and asking you, like, what do you think about how these particular mountain regions of our bordering areas can really be a symbol of resilience, both for conservation of wildlife in these regions, but also for the people that live here. So, would you?
Thank you, Manip. Yeah, as you already mentioned, that I mostly work in Gilgit-Baltistan, where working with the communities is not that much difficult because the communities are very cooperative, and they were taking benefits from the wildlife in a sustainable way through because they have a lot of customary laws that they actually use to harvest any animal or plant whatsoever. But after the 90s, model trophy hunting program enables them to earn millions of rupees, and that really help them to transform their social life, especially the education. So working with the communities in Gilgit-Baltistan is not a difficult or challenging thing. But the challenge comes when you start working, as a researcher. And my organization mostly works, mostly do research. So the research in these mountains of Gilgit-Baltistan is very challenging. And, people often ask me about this, and I have listed on, 6 major challenges which we always faced. So the first challenge is, as you all know, the remoteness of the areas, because in many regions you don't have proper roads to go there. And if you luckily get a proper road to go there, the weather is very harsh. So working, in that extreme weather is very challenging for researchers. And then financial resources. If you are working in these rugged mountains, very far from the major towns or villages, so you need not a lot of resources. You have to keep a lot of people for assisting you. So you have to pay them, you have to feed them, and so paying them and feeding them needs a lot of resources. And then if you are working, or your organization is working on carnivores as SLF does, people have negative interactions with these carnivores. And when you talk about snow leopard research or snow leopard things, they somehow or the other way, they start don't liking you. And then the mountain terrain is itself, so there is a lot of risks are associated with the mountain terrain. So and the you can say the highest risk our team had faced, you might heard that we lost 6 people in 2017 while returning from a research work or from the survey, uh, from the field survey. So this is the the extreme risk that we always had, and we will face in future whenever we do any research on these mountains. And the sixth thing is permissions. While working on the international border, like with the China, Gilgit-Baltistan shares border with the China, well, there is no issue because their border is not militarized. So you can go there while taking a simple permission from the Parks and Wildlife Department. But once we did a camera trapping in along the LOC in Kashmir, so firstly, getting NOC is almost impossible thing. But we luckily got the NOC. But after getting the NOC and working there is very difficult because as two other participants said, the for the military, there is something very they see the research very something very they are what are you are doing, why you are doing here, why you are camera traps. And this is the common thing along the LOC, whether you are working in Kashmir or in Gilgit-Baltistan. So these were the challenges, and it these challenges become more worsen if we are working on the LOC side of in Gilgit-Baltistan or in Kashmir. And but you can't surrender to these challenges, because working in the areas that borders with the China is easy because you can get permissions very easily and there is no military. So nobody asks you what are you doing and why you are going there. But if you take the potential of that side, there is least number of mammals. Like at the Chinese side, we mainly trapped snow leopard, brown bear, Marco Polo sheep, and Himalayan ibex and blue sheep. These are the major mammals that live on their side of Gilgit-Baltistan. But if we go to LOC side, though that's very fragile, but still it has a lot of potential and diversity for the species. And their side, at LOC side, we trapped snow leopard, brown bear, black bear, Himalayan ibex, markhor, musk deer, Ladakh Puriyar, major important species live in that side. And because that is a forested area, so there is a great diversity of birds also. So, well, working at LOC is a challenge, but if you take the potential of the that side, you can't, say that you can't leave that by looking at the challenge.
Right.
So, and as you ask me, the resilience, well, the communities, if we see how resilient are these mountain ranges. The communities were, benefiting themselves from the resources from these mountains in a organized, in a decided way. So when they feel that, but this practice is not, no, I'm talking, I'm discussing a practice that was common or 2 or 3 decades ago. So when they feel, even in some areas, still this is very active, when they feel, our number of ibexes have reduced, they stops, stops to poach them. And when they feel their number is, grow after some years, maybe 5, 6, whatsoever years, they start, to their practice. So if the conservation continues in any form, whether from the community side or from the NGO side or from the Parks and Wildlife Department itself, these mountains are very resilient, and they support a diverse life of form, and they help them all to regain an upper threshold. And the final thing you said, how these mountain ranges can be the symbol of cooperation. Well, the people who live on the border side, whether it is LOC or the China border, the people on either side of the borders belongs to either to same culture, same religion, same sect, or same language. So they are, one way or other way, they are connected. When the conservation, is strong at one side, they know the people from the other side, and they give example of that. In the China side, they are doing this, and we are doing this. In the India side, we were interviewing some people in the Minimark area. So they were saying on the other side of the LOC, there is a great conservation for, musk deer, because the Indian army is somehow, doing, helping or not, allowing people to kill musk deer. I don't know whether that was true or, that was a false statement, but still one of the person on the other side of LOC was telling me. So we can use that, similarities to conserve animal on both sides by giving the examples and interacting. And as you know, the social media is has reached to all these areas, and they know the people. Like if someone is living in this part of the border, and the one is living on the other part of the border, they try to interact with each other on the social media. And if we means NGOs, the government, or conservation agencies would able to conserve animals on one side, or convince people for conservation on one side, the other side, and other NGO can use that example on other side to do the same. So these were some of my experiences.
Thank you so much, Zainab, for sharing that. I mean, this is such a wonderful way to sort of open up the floor to the audience, because it's such an optimistic message. It's really true to what conservation optimism really is all about. I mean, it really it's fascinating to hear from you how, it's different along the two sort of borders in Pakistan, one with China and the other, the LOC in India. And it's lovely to hear, and we sort of allude to this in India as well, how these regions are really biodiversity hotspots. And it seems like, both people's culture and way of living is very similar across the two borders, but also the sort of the biodiversity assemblages. So it's just really inspiring to hear from you that, we can be an example for each other, where things are happening more proactively or more productively on one side, that can serve as an example to the other side. Because, it's literally sort of an imaginary line that is more real than it should be, perhaps, that divides the two areas. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'll open the floor to questions. I think there's a hand raised by Shazeb. Is that a question that you wanted to ask, or just give it?
Yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Shazib Rahman and I am the student of English Literature at Government College University Lahore. My question is from Saloni Bhatia, who is the co-host from our beloved neighboring country. And question is that the world is having that their priorities are going to be changed nowadays. Like same in the case for my degree that we don't have much priority in case of literature as compared to linguistic. So same is the case going for that we are paying much attention to the conservation of plants and having a lot of plantation campaigns in Pakistan and all over the world because we need and we are in need of to have some oxygen. So it's our own interest that we are getting more and more campaigns for plantation. But we are saying that in conservation of the animals, especially for wildlife. So my question is that is it okay to create then a potential and pressure group to raise this awareness for the conservation of animals all over the world, and how we can create empathy for the wildlife to get some campaigns for the conservation of animals? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question, and it's lovely to see that you're a literature student as well. That was what I did my undergraduate degree, and then I transitioned into conservation. So actually, just as a side note, you're in a really good position because you come from a very different lens with which to look at conservation and how outreach and conservation messaging is done. And also, like you said, there are many things that one can do to kind of enhance people's empathy. Folklore and building conservation messaging that is culturally more relevant, that resonates with people culturally, and I'll give you an example of that, is one way to do it, but there are many other ways. So I remember, when I was collecting data on, okay, how many livestock have you lost to the snow leopard, at the end of it, they would describe, their experiences with these carnivores, and they would say, oh, the snow leopard mother with her cub, came into the corral and killed some 90 sheep or whatever, and, it's been a big loss. But then they would also end by saying, but she's also a mother, unko bhi to pet bharna hai, you also need to fill their stomach. So I think there's a lot of empathy that is already there that needs only enhancement, not really a recreation. I think, I remember this one person describing the shine of the ibex horn when the sun's rays fall on it, and how that perhaps makes carnivores very happy to see them. So I'm saying that there's a lot of aesthetic and empathetic values that people already associate with animals. And when one delves into local cultures, how communities actually think of these animals, you can automatically find ways that will make them connect to these animals. And it could be for plants, it could be for animals that are considered to be dangerous and having a much larger negative impact. So, and a lot of them, we noticed when we were doing the research, had also connections to religion. So, for example, certain animals are used as vehicles for many of the Buddhist deities. Certain animals, so for the snow leopard, if you really compare, say, the snow lion in the Tibetan Buddhist philosophy to the snow leopard, you will realize that there are many similarities. In fact, you almost feel like this is possibly an idealized version of an actual real life predator, which is the snow leopard. Because the snow lion, like the snow leopard, it has a camouflaged coat, it has a bushy tail, it lives in the snow mountains, it hunts wildlife. So there are a lot of similarities in which they have, used animals to kind of deify them, and that also then creates a different kind of empathy for these animals. So surely that is required. I think conservation done purely on the basis of their inherent value perhaps might not appeal to everybody. If one has to capture a larger, canvas of audience, then looking at it through multiple perspectives, like you say, creating empathy, compassion, trying to find common ground for why animals and humans must share space is very important. I think. I hope I've answered it. If not, you can feel free to answer.
Thanks for that, Saloni. I mean, I just wanted to add sentences to say, I think it's so interesting that you talked about how sometimes we think we are starting from scratch, but we're not necessarily starting from scratch. There is a base, be it empathy, be it compassion, be it some sort of connection that people have with wildlife. And I think it's important to try and understand that. So I think that was super interesting. In the interest of time, I'll jump to the next question, if that's okay. I'll just open the chat, and Fatul Bari asks, and I think we've spoken a little bit about it, since I've definitely alluded to it, so did Marine and Machine Man. There are instances when research or conservation work on either side are either restricted or banned by the armies or other forces. How can we deal with this along the Pakistan-India-China border? And I think the second part of the question is something we haven't necessarily spoken much about is, and there are sometimes, restrictions due to fences, that restrict movement of species or also people. Any thoughts on this? I don't know if Marine or Nosheen, man, you wanted to say something about that. I'll leave the floor to anyone.
Munib, should I answer?
Sure, Sensor. I think we'll let maybe Marine go quickly, and then we can have you answer at the end, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. We realize that this is a problem. I mean, there are international borders which are hindering movement of animals, as well as work across the borders. But one thing that I can think of right away is internet is a very good source of connection. So I don't think that scientists don't collaborate. Scientists from all across the world collaborate with each other. So borders should not be a case in this here. That's what I could think of. Collaborations. I know of people who collaborate with people all across the globe. So once I was in China, there were people who were working in Indonesia. It doesn't have anything to do with the borders, but I'm just saying how internet can work, so they had collaborations all across the world, and there were people who were working over the internet only. We have excelled so much in communications globally that we can easily collaborate. We need not go to the place in order to work. We can talk to people, find similar kind of people who work, their exchange papers, exchange research. I think such things can work. That's what I can think of.
Yeah, thanks, Marine. Sensor, do you want to add something about, particularly the fences?
At Chinese border, there is they have fenced some spots, where from the animals can pass into either countries, but their aim was not to stopping animals from entering to Pakistan or from Pakistan to China. Rather, they did for stopping the livestock that, which communities take to the border for grazing. So their only wish was to just stop entering the livestock from either side of the border. But if you take the LOC, the situation is different. here at the LOC, I didn't see any fence. Maybe if they erect the fence more in recent years, I don't have an idea, but I'm talking about of 2014. So, when we ask for a NOC along the LOC, the army has some issues. They do love wildlife, and some officers listens your research, and they appreciate what you are doing. But for them, border security is above all. So in that, and if you are an NGO, they become more choosy in giving you NOC. So what we did here in Gilbertstan, we trained the Parks and Wildlife Department staff. Now, for them, getting NOC or going there is a bit easy than the guys from an NGO. So this practice can also be, test in China, India, because maybe this work for the people on the other side of the India. But in Gilbertstan, it start working for us.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sensor. That's really interesting to hear how you tackle that situation. I think Nosheen, ma'am, with the same question, and maybe also the second question below in the chat by Trisha, which I think Mehreen also spoke a little bit about, this whole situation about restriction in the borders, but also the larger question about how we can collaborate, especially, because you're from a university setting. It'd be lovely to hear from you. So, Nosheen,
I'm really sorry that I couldn't understand your question properly. There is much interruption due to weak internet. Can you please repeat?
Yes, I'll just repeat it. I mean, I was sort of clubbing the two questions that were asked in the chat. One is about how, how we can work better along the sort of India, China, Pakistan border, especially when there are lots of restrictions imposed by forces like the army or physical barriers such as fences. And the second question, which is a bit broader, by Trisha in the chat, which talks about collaboration. How can we collaborate more with researchers or conservationists across the two countries? So just these two questions for you.
Okay. As I mentioned that we are doing work here in LOC of in District Poonch, and now the situation here is a bit better because of ceasefire, and as our team is doing work there. Otherwise, previously it was very dangerous to go there, and it was a very difficult task. But now, due to ceasefire, the situation is a bit better. But still, there are different, problems, as we are not allowed to go there with GPS. We are not supposed to go there and to survey the area in detail like this. But I think that there must be some relaxation in the policies, particularly for students who are intended to do work. And regarding your second question, we all are conservationists, regardless of our nationality, religion, or sect. And we must do work in collaboration, and we are doing so. As I have many good relations with the different scientists in India and in other part of the world, and they are really very helping. And I think it's, again, I will say that it's not a matter of religion. We are not biased to each other, and we can improve this collaboration in future. And okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Nosheen. That was really inspiring to hear. I see that we are running short of time, but we have two quick questions. So if people are happy to hang on for about 5 to 10 minutes, we'll try and maybe get through those two questions and sort of end with that. There's one question directed to Mehreen. It's in the chat. Sorry, I'm just going to go through. My next question is for Mehreen. We have seen that people do their research on social issues just to get their PhD, their scholarships for PhD from foreign universities. how can we encourage teachers to motivate their students to get in this research in wildlife and work on the grassroots level? So Mary, I don't know if you want to.
In order to motivate students, firstly, the teachers should be motivated. That's what I think. It's okay to go for PhDs in foreign universities, but I would always suggest that come back to your roots and implement what you have learned during your PhD or during your research in the place where you are from. That's a way of creating a a research pool in the area where you are from. That's how research from that area will be done. And in terms of motivating students to get into the research in wildlife conservation, I think both India and Pakistan, we we are reaching to that level where people are starting to know that what wildlife conservation is. We let's not compare ourselves to other countries where they have already done enough for wildlife or wildlife conservation, as to say. We are at a very preliminary stage, as what I understand, in terms of wildlife conservation. First and foremost is we need to have a lot of awareness. The people overall need to have a lot of awareness about what wildlife do we have, and conservation comes as a last step. That's what I understand, and that's what I think of. So first and foremost is awareness. Once you are aware of what things you have around, what are their importance in our ecosystem, then only you can motivate the students in research associated with conservation. Yeah, that's I think, Munib, you would be a better person to answer this question. That's what I could think of right now about this thing.
That's great, man. Thanks. I mean, I think you echo a lot of what I would say, and I think it's important to have, as you said, motivated people, motivated teachers that can sort of inspire the so-called next generation. Sorry. So thank you for that. I'll quickly jump to the next question. I do want to mention that we are running slightly over time, so if people need to leave or want to say something, we'll open our mics shortly so people can maybe ask questions. If the panelists are happy to stay for another 10 minutes, that would be great, but I totally understand if you have somewhere to be. So we have a question from the YouTube live that's going. The question is, being a lay person, what do you think our responsibility for conservation should be? And I can sort of maybe add to that, particularly in these, in these sort of border regions that we've been speaking about. I don't know if any one of our panelists wants to take that or open that, please.
May I answer?
Yeah, please.
I think conservation is something that all of us at different levels should ideally try to engage in. Simply because, not just because the survival depends on it, but we are going to lose a lot of our heritage if it just goes away without anyone having seen it. But as a lay person, stay and with my family, and they're visiting a new place. I think just to reach out to the right people to get to know more about the places you're visiting. Being a responsible tourist, for example, goes a long way in contributing to conservation impact. So it could be what is being done with the garbage. Are you disposing it correctly? It can be as simple as that. Or can you choose more sustainable ways of transportation? There are many simple things that one could do when it comes to conservation. So if you really break it down, what are we talking about when we talk about conservation? And all the other elements that go into this concept we call nature. So, just being more mindful, I would say, of whenever we are in a place, of what is the right or what is what do you say? What are the social norms of the region? Being culturally sensitive. These are some of the things I think they contribute.
Thanks for saying that, Sarodi. I mean, and I completely second that. I think you mentioned once about sort of being a conscious person or a conscious traveler. I mean, as a layperson who's not quote unquote within conservation, one thing one can definitely do is, when we travel or go to certain places, to learn more about what kind of, what's the culture there, what's the human nature relationships and interactions there. If we learn, I firmly believe if we sort of learn and have more awareness about these issues, we don't necessarily have to be professionals within conservation to be conservationists. We can be conservationists without actually, sort of being in that professional space as well. So sorry, you wanted to add something?
If I may add, one more thing. I mean, also just this whole idea that nature or conservation can be done outside of where you are, because you may be in a city, is also not really the right way to think of it. I mean, this is just a general. So we often tend to think of conservation of wild areas or whatever we think are unpeopled habitats. But something as simple as you just look in your background, in your backyard, and just keep your eyes open. Just observe plants. Observe when they are fruiting, observe when they have flowers. Has it changed over the years? Or looking at bugs, looking at how birds fly, looking at their different behaviors. There's so much one can do in any landscape that one is facing. You don't need to go to exotic landscapes to conserve them. If you just look around you, there's so much of biodiversity around you. And just, I think simply like I think Naveen said, or Nausheen ma'am said that just simply learning, about these places can actually then think of whether you want to take it up as a research or want to engage more deeply. But I think observation is the key kind of starting point.
Thanks for saying that. So I'm feeling quite bad that we only have 1 hour for this conversation, but we'll we could go on, and it's so many fascinating points to talk about. But I do want to give the floor very quickly to Dr. Zahid Iqbal, because I think he has been waiting to ask a question. So Bilal, I don't know if you want to unmute Dr. Zahid, or Dr. Zahid, if you want to type in the chat, whatever is easiest. I'll just give you a minute to do that.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Zahid Iqbal Khan, and I'm ex-Deputy Director Wildlife. And now I am retired after serving not more than 27 years in Wildlife Department. And I served particularly in Gujranwala Division, where we have a border area with India. And it is interesting that we are achieving to settle the population of Sambar, which was not present previously in our Pakistan. But somehow some animals may cross the wire or may anyway come to the come in our area where they were hunted. After education and awareness and special campaigns, we are able to save those animals at border belt area, and now we are going to settle that population at that particular place. The first animal we find in Punjab was from Shadara, that was crossed in front of Shadara from India. So we have pairs in zoos. The zoo is a major source of education and awareness, and especially for motivation of research for young students, and which are interested in wildlife conservation in future. So after giving an idea that sambar is very rare and extinct in Pakistan, and we are going to have this population of this animal in our area. So now it is very interesting that we have 2 or 3 zoos where we have established population of sambar in captive, as well as we are now going, if there is an animal that crossed from India to Pakistan, we allow them in that particular area in situ conservation. We have special arrangements, and at border belt area, we have settled population now in Punjab. Thank God. So in this way, I think so, if there is collaboration between different scientists, they belong to India, they belong to Pakistan, they belong to Iran, or anywhere which are our neighbor countries, we can establish such populations, such species which are endangered, are almost extinct in particular country, and that may be established with the collaboration of different countries where that population is present and habitat is present in our country. We can establish that population here successfully. So this is my message to all consultants and scientists to do work like such that, as I've done, that we have settled the population of sambar in Pakistan now. So this was my message. If there's any question regarding conservation, establishment, zoos from Punjab, I am here to answer any type of question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that, Zahid sir. I mean, it's so fascinating, and I think it alludes to the point of how we need multi-pronged approaches to conservation. You know, sometimes these more ex situ type of conservation activities are important, especially for very, very rare species. I mean, India has been having lots of debates about reintroducing cheetahs, for instance, for many, many years. You know, and in other places there is more classic in situ conservation that might work, and in other places a mix of the two. So I think it's really interesting to hear your perspective, and also, you know, the importance of things like zoos within conservation. So thank you. I'll ask Maria to ask a question next. Maria, please.
Yes, hello. My name is Maria, and I'm currently working on human-wildlife conflict in Sindh. My question is particularly for the female panelists we have here. First, I would like to ask Marine, who spoke about the struggles of being a woman in the field, and I would like to ask that, Marine, did you struggle also with your male colleagues not taking you very seriously and thinking that you're not as credible or not as good as them because you are a female? And the second question about the same thing was that the common idea is that it's not very safe for women to go out in the field in India and Pakistan and third world countries in general. So how did you deal with that? Like, how did you manage your own fears and actually keep yourself safe while working on such important things in Pakistan and India?
Thanks, Maria, for the question. It's actually, I did not face, to be honest, I did not face any difficulty in terms of, you know, my colleagues or my male colleagues questioning my credibility. It was, what can I say? I think all PhD students over here would understand they have a problem of imposter syndrome. So I was more of that kind. So actually, the male colleagues that I've had were very supportive here in the field or back in the university. They're actually motivated me to do this work that I've done. Other than that, yeah, I understand the second question that you asked was about, you know, because we come from a very conservative, wherever you go, you'll get this question. There are many people who have asked this question to me, that you being a Muslim female and a Kashmiri, how do you deal with this? So it was difficult, you know, firstly to deal with that initially on my own. But then, as I said earlier as well, I have had very good family support in terms of that, you know. But yeah, there were times when I was not allowed to stay in the field for the night. For example, if there was a field day when I had to stay there and go early in the morning back to, you know, see the langurs, it was difficult for me to do that. So I had to select a place or a field base where I could come back home or go back again early in the morning. Even if I leave at 4 in the morning, and that was okay. But I could not, you know, stay there. Mm-hmm. That was something that I faced. I still face that. After you know, being in this field for 7 long years, I still have to convince my family that this is something that I have, you know, chosen to work on, and this is something my lifestyle is going to be. I still face this problem, and I don't know what can solve this problem. Either I have to be very rebellious, to get this work done,
Be the
or
black of the family.
yeah, or they just have to disown me in this regard. I'm sure they're listening to it. But yeah, I'm actually very thankful that my family understood what I wanted to do. And they never said no, but then they have their own reservations, as I said
For your
earlier.
safety, of course. It's really happy to hear that higher up in the actual professional field that you do have supportive male colleagues. It's very inspiring to me as, someone, a young conservationist who hasn't gotten into the field yet. It's really inspiring for me to think that, okay, in the field, I may not actually face like these misogynistic or sexist problems that I have the idea that I would. So thank you so much for answering those questions for me.
Thank you.
My next question would be for Saloni. I wanted to ask a little more about like the folklore and the stories, because when I was working in Sindh, I heard some really interesting like stories about the Sindhi culture that had to do with like why they're not conserving crocodiles or gharials, because of a lot of these cultural myths and stories that they had. So I would like to hear a little about what these stories are like in India on the other side of the border. I wanted to hear about what animal is usually like comes up a lot in the folklores, maybe tigers, leopards. So I was hoping you could tell me about that.
So, well, for the area I worked in, I think that the animal that featured the most was the ibex. And, that was actually a little bit surprising to any researcher that I was, because in my head, I had gone there to study snow leopards, which I thought, given how rare they are, given how they are the top predators, they might feature more in folklore. That was just a kind of a bias that I was working with. And I realized then that an ecological flagship is very different from a cultural flagship. And for something to be a cultural flagship, it was something that people kind of see on a daily basis or more frequently, interact with that animal more frequently. So the ibex, there are a lot of songs about, how elaborate their hunts are, the entire process, which is almost like a festival, celebrating the hunt. They prepare their meal early in the morning, and then they go for the shikar, and then they come back, and then they have some hunting dogs. So the entire folklore or the folk song would describe this whole process. Even something, so the ibex, for example, was also used to celebrate the start of Losar, which is a Tibetan New Year. When there was the birth of a male child in the family, people would make ibex out of dough, atta, and then display it. So there were, they had very intricate kind of a relationship with this animal. And therefore their perspectives about the ibex are also that much more nuanced. So even if it did come, so I remember in Kargil, for instance, it was not the ibex but another game species. I think it was it the Urial? I'm not entirely sure, but there was a myth that when they come from the pastures or from the mountains to the farm area, that indicates that there will be a natural disaster. So the last time it happened, there was a flood, a flash flood in the area, which was then attributed to the animal. Or the start of a new year, if the ibex is the vehicle of the deity, then that ibex you will actually find at the place of the worship of that deity. So they build these structures called the latos, and they believe that on the day the deity kind of which is a day dedicated to the deity, the ibex actually comes down because it's the vehicle of that particular deity. It comes down from the mountains to kind of be with the deity, So it's very interesting to see how all these, it's a very
and about the more negative like connotations and views, like when you're working in conservation, how do you dispel those myths to people who have been hearing the same negative views for generations? I'm sure that's really difficult to explain to them that's not how it actually works. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so the thing is, then there's a thin line between being a researcher and a conservationist, because as a researcher, your job is to kind of document without a bias. as a conservationist, you may want to then think of ways of creating conservation messages that are, more conservative. But if as a researcher, I try to dispel the myth that will bring in biases into my research. So in that sense, research is slightly easier to do. But when it comes to conservation and actual, engaging with people to change their perspective, that's a kind of different area of work. And I feel that one of the things that helps is, to try to, a lot of them have second-hand knowledge. Not a lot of them have experienced these interactions firsthand. So to try to show them the other side, which they might not have seen. So, taking them on treks, taking them on trails. So a lot of hunters who we interact with have such beautiful and intricate knowledge of the mountains, which even as an ecologist or as a researcher, I wouldn't have. So just engaging with the elders in a community who've been traditional hunters and, passing on that knowledge about animal behavior or, those kind of things. I don't think people are used to appreciating the animal with all its dimensions, So I think one way to do it is to offer them a different perspective instead of being very evangelical about it. We're just saying, okay, hey, you know this about the animal or you know that about the animal. And it does catch, it does interest a lot of young people that decide that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Saroni, and thank you for the wonderful questions, Maria. We'll take one last question with which we'll wrap up. But before I read out that question, just wanted to allude to the point of, again, reiterating how important it is to have storytelling, folklore, that should be really brought out and, to the example, Saloni, you shared as well about the ibex. I think it's important, I feel, for all of us, who are from these landscapes to really write about these stories, because that's the way, they will be then told. There was lots written, for instance, during the time of the British rule, for instance, and maybe less so more recently. So it's nice to see these sort of stories be told in different forms. So thank you for that. So the very last question, and I apologize again for the time, is from Tahir. I'll just read it out. He says, "Hi, I have a question. How difficult is it to get an international body like CITES formed, which looks at cross-border conservation issues like trade?" I wonder if, Hussain sir, you wanted to take that maybe in the context of trophy hunting or in general. I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah, Munib, for trophy hunting, it is very clear, So our National Ministry of Climate Change issues the permits for the certain number of trophies when the provincial governments make a request for the certain number of trophies. So taking those trophies to outside Pakistan is not difficult, because they are doing all these under the CITES supervision or or you can say from their permission. Rest for illegal trade, there is some also illegal trades also happens between the borders, and the very famous case which I seen in the recent years was a consignment of turtle was confiscated at the Pakistan-China border. So illegal trapping is also happen, but for legal part, there is no issue, because they are doing all these with the permission of CITES.
Great, thanks for that information, Spencer. I also wanted to just very quickly add that while sort of these international bodies or groups, it's sometimes very hard to work. There are some very interesting and useful examples where countries have collaborated. Recently there is the whole GSLEP initiative, the Global Snow Leopard Environmental Protection Program. Sensor is part of it. Lots of different countries, the 12 different countries where snow leopards are found, are part of it. And country governments do work together. They found these bodies to work together. From everything from doing more robust science on ground in these snow leopard landscapes to combating illegal wildlife trade. So there are issues with these international organizations, but there are some really sort of good, more proactive examples out there as well. So I think it's a bit for palette. I see there's lots of comments, but I think there's another question. I don't know if we have time for another question. I think maybe, I don't know if there are any thoughts or comments that people have. What we can maybe do, Bilal, if that's okay, we'll take all the questions. And if there are specific questions for our panelists, maybe we can email it to them and have people reply, because I'm just conscious that, we've run half an hour post our time. So I don't want to keep people, if that's okay. Yeah, so we can have, I think we can just.
You can simply unmute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. So maybe with that, I just wanted to say a couple of words of thanks to Mary, Noshin ma'am, Hussain sir, and Saroni. Really, really informative to have you guys. Again, apologies for running late. It's filled me personally with so much excitement and optimism to hear all these different stories, from both sides of the border. And it just sort of, reiterates to me the importance of us sharing these stories, these lived experiences, so we can learn from each other, and also sort of, as people alluded to in the conversation, collaborate into the future. We hope to keep these sort of, webinars that bridge the border, as we so call it, continue into the future. We're very conscious that, a lot of the talk we've done today has been very geographically specific. India and Pakistan share its maritime borders, for instance, or other ecosystems. And I think it's equally important to speak about those, and we hope to do that into the near future. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you have a really, really lovely evening or day wherever you are, and feel free to contact us. I'll just put our website. So if you just type conservation, optimism, on Google, you should be able to see our website. We have some hub pages there, so you can scroll through it, and there's contact details for all of us there. So with that, thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you, Muniz and Bilal.
Thank you.
And all the
Thank you so much, all.
It was lovely interacting with them.
Thank you so much, Tony and Mehdi, for having me.
So
And thank you, Munib bhai, for arranging that.
Thank you all. Thank you. Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.